wrestling. It's the seminal sport of mankind, going back at least 5,000 years. It was one of the original Olympic sports of ancient Greece. Wrestling is one of the threads that has brought societies together through the millennia. There's one particular style of wrestling that is quickly fading with time. And at one point, it was the most popular sport in the world. And this man was its most famous star. His legend is fading, and this traditional style of wrestling is disappearing because it is widely unknown. Its influence is felt everywhere to this day. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, folk style, freestyle, professional wrestling, boxing, and mixed martial arts. This style of wrestling is called catch as catch can. My name is Curran Jacobs, and I too am a wrestler. Throughout this documentary, I will be traveling the heart of America with the world's leading wrestling author and historian, Mike Chapman.
Mike Chapman. He's the historian when it comes to all that stuff.
Yeah.
To me, it's the man you want to speak to for, like,
Yeah.
We got a legend here too.
Thank you so much.
Right here, we got a legend right here.
I keep bringing up the name Mike Chapman. He's the most respected author on the sport of wrestling ever. He's written more books than anyone else, and his knowledge goes, I can't even tell you, decades old. Very intelligent on the sport. It's what we call having a high wrestling IQ.
He has been named National Wrestling Writer of the Year 5 times and is a member of 11 Halls of Fame. He also created the Dan Hodge Trophy, which is the Heisman Trophy for wrestlers. Together, we will reveal why this man is so important and how instrumental this style of wrestling was for the future of combat sports and entertainment. We begin our journey in New Salem, Illinois.
Think of this. In 1831, a young 22-year-old Abraham Lincoln walked into this village for the first time ever, walked down this lane into American destiny.
Was this a catch wrestling match, or was this similar to Irish collar and elbow?
Wait a minute. What is catch wrestling?
Like a word when we use, I catch that guy, yes, I submit that guy.
Basically anything you can catch.
Yeah.
You catch an arm, you break it. You catch a leg, you break it. You catch a head or a neck, you snap it.
It was a style that developed amongst different types of wrestling styles. So a lot of these other styles had starting positions. You're grabbing someone around the collar and grabbing around the elbow, or there's another one called like back hold. So you would actually start like in an embrace hold, but catch wrestling, you started neutral. So you're not touching the other person.
And they allowed leg locks, arm twists, stretches, finger locks, and then obviously the wrestling.
You gotta legitimately be tough. You gotta have dog in you. You got to be good at this. You gotta be a little mean. you know, and you kind of gotta like pain. The very first time you get cross-faced, right? It's an it blows your mind, because you're not getting cross-faced like this. You're getting cross-faced like that, right? You're basically getting punched in the face, but without the actual cocking of the hand. It's more of a big push, right? That's terrible. That's a dangerous position. They'll throw you out. They'll DQ you somewhere else.
Catch-as-catch-can wrestling started in the UK, in England, and our forefathers brought it over to America. Many of our presidents and founding fathers were wrestlers, and catch-as-catch-can wrestling was the original style. Freestyle, all these other more modern styles of wrestling didn't come until much later.
Even Jack Johnson, the amazing legendary boxer, competed in catch wrestling matches, because even boxing and wrestling weren't that separated back in those eras.
They say that catch wrestling is a lost art of hooking. And hooking is getting your hooks in so you can turn a person and submit them and stretch them, crank them, rip them, and tear them.
Back in those days, there was no team sports. There was no baseball. There was no NBA. There was no NFL. The biggest celebrities in our society were the world champion in boxing and the world champion in catch-as-catch-can wrestling.
All right, now let's get back to my question on Abraham Lincoln's wrestling match.
Was this a catch wrestling match, or was this similar to Irish collar and elbow?
Great question. It was called grappling back then. There was no really term known as wrestling per se. Even back to the biblical times, it was scuffling or grappling or hand fighting. You know, we have on the pyramids of Egypt, we have hieroglyphics showing people what we call wrestling. Who knows what they called it back then, but this was frontier style grappling, Curran, from which evolved catch wrestling and scholastic wrestling and freestyle wrestling.
In 1831, Abraham Lincoln took on Jack Armstrong in front of a large crowd right here in this village.
They started out with side holds. Mark, just kind of get comfortable, and you're the referee, and we're not wrestling yet, and we're goofing around, and you ready? I'm ready. And you'd say, go. And Mark would throw me to my back.
You step back and you look, man, this guy was not only as big in Illinois, but as big in the whole country and possibly the whole world.
Most of the scholars who really get into his background say it was this wrestling match that changed his life. Lincoln said it was the first time he ever gained confidence in himself enough to take on any challenge. So I tell people it was a wrestling match that helped change the destiny of America.
I don't know if you know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. And you know, the sport of wrestling, that's its roots. And I love that type of stuff that tells us, hey, this is where it started. When you're talking about this, and then we go to catch wrestling into high schools, and think about the hundreds of thousands, probably now millions of kids that have been impacted by that sport that started way back in this era.
Before we get into who this man is, we have to pay homage to where it all began. Catch wrestling became popular in the United States at the very beginning of the 20th century. And England's own Billy Riley has had an influence that has echoed across time. Billy Riley was born in 1896 and was the founder of the Riley's Gym, the Snake Pit. He developed his skills by wrestling local miners in his hometown of Wigan, and soon became one of the most legendary wrestling coaches in the history of the United Kingdom.
Come on, put some gusto in it.
One of his most notable students was Carl Gotch. In Japan, Carl is known as the god of wrestling. He is one of the most important figures in the development of shoot wrestling, which is unscripted, a real-life occurrence within a wrestling event. In 1984, Carl Gotch's students in Japan founded the Universal Wrestling Federation.
Wayne Shamrock would come from the South and be brought over to wrestle as Wayne Shamrock in the newborn or second UWF, which would eventually translate into him going to Fujiwara Gumi, continuing to train with Funaki and Suzuki. And then it became Pancras. Out of Pancras, now you get Boss Rutan and Frank Shamrock. Now there's the Lion's Den. This just continues and it compounds upon itself. And this all stems from Carl Gotch.
Shuto originally came out before Jiu-Jitsu, made it big, and we had amateur shoot matches, shoot wrestling matches, Shuto, at the Inosanto Academy, and all the guys learned all the lock flows. There's 150 submissions in the Shuto lock flows 1 through 10, and it's all catch wrestling.
And I'm in that lineage. Matt Hume got to train under Funaki and Suzuki, who are part of that Gotch lineage. Eric Paulson trained under Sayama and Yorinaga Nakamura, who are part of that Fujiwara and Gotch direct lineage.
Shuto is of Carl Gotch lineage, so all the submissions that we do came from the Snake Pit.
Sure.
Billy Robinson, Billy Riley, Roy Wood, they're all, it's from the same lineage.
Another protege of the Snake Pit, Billy Robinson, is considered to be one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. And he was one of the leading practitioners of catch wrestling.
I connected Billy and Jake Shannon together, and I'm like, dude, let's get this guy on the road doing these seminars and doing this. And Jake put this whole program together, just kept Billy working till his dying days, man. Getting him out there and teaching the world and showing his stuff.
He's on the head, right? I want to put his tricep in, and I'm going to turn the bone in. I haven't put pressure on yet. I'm going to hold my knees in.
Jake was gracious enough to take him under and start to get him out there to promote catch wrestling. And it was kind of weird because catch wrestling was so under the radar and everyone was doing jiu-jitsu at the time.
So I started grappling for a while, but I decided to go into pro wrestling instead. And while I was in pro wrestling, because I had such a strong grappling history, a lot of the guys that were the pro wrestlers kept telling me about these guys like Lou Thez and Carl Gotch and Billy Robinson, these shooters that did catch wrestling. So that was kind of the genesis of it.
Billy Robinson, man, Coach Billy Robinson was a larger than life character, both in and outside of the ring. I remember we hosted the very first seminar of his return to Great Britain.
Well, I'm trying to go back to England and bring back the truth about real catchers, catch-can wrestling, the best martial arts in the world.
Once he got into the actual training hall, his demeanor changed massively. He transformed into something else. I remember him asking, how do you usually get warm? And this one fella from up the road in Newcastle, he said, we're all from different gyms. Billy looked at him like he was going to tear his head off there, and then he banged his walking stick on the floor. Then he pointed at him. He said, I didn't ask you where you were from. I asked you, how do you get warm, you f***ing piece of He screamed and shouted at him like a sergeant major, and I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be amazing. I cannot wait.
I was fortunate enough to get the chance to work with Billy Robinson a little bit with one of my mentors and training partners, Neil Melanson, and again, the guy that I got my black belt in Jiu-Jitsu under. He came out, did a seminar for just a handful of us, and it was a very unique experience. Here's a guy with a ton of history, ton of experience in catch, little things and grips and you know, these subtleties that wrestling is known for, that sometimes makes the difference between a successful attempt at a technique and falling flat on your face. So it was nice to be around a legend like that and a guy that had been so well known in the sport of catch.
If you look at the people that Billy has put his hands on, you know, Sakuraba, Miyato, Tamura, Ric Flair, woo! Iron Sheik, and so on and so on and so on. Man, they all came out. Hideki Suzuki, they're all incredible. They're all badass.
at the end of this tape, if you have a weak stomach, I say this many, many times, don't watch.
Carl Gotch also worked and trained with none other than Judo Gene LaBelle.
Gene LaBelle, my coach in this country, that he does a catch wrestling. A lot of his instructors are unbelievably strong guys and big names.
Uncle Gene. So Gene LaBelle is, in a way, he's kind of a Billy of America in some sense, in that he's had such a touch on so many people.
Judo Gene LaBelle was one of the great hookers, one of the great fighters in catch wrestling, and in many ways, what Judo Gene LaBelle did was helped formulate, unknowingly by the way, what the future of the sport looked like. He'd have over 1,000 fights. Think about that. And he's also been in over 1,000 movies. But he doesn't want to take any credit for that.
What a lovely man. I mean, what a man full of capability of violence and destruction. If he can show holds on you that just makes you feel like your bones are going to explode out of your skin, which is kind of a trademark, it seems to be, as some of these old codgers.
Gene LaBelle is another one of those guys that's grounded in wrestling. Certainly people think of judo when they think of Gene, but Gene is also a catch wrestler. He's who Neil Melanson got his black belt under. So in some sort of way, I'm connected to Gene. I know Gene well. He's an amazing guy, great person. And again, those little subtleties, the split finger lock for cross-facing and choking, just had a unique way of doing a little bit of everything, right down to his pinky.
Roy Wood attended Riley's gym at the age of 15. He dedicated his life to learning the authentic style of catch as catch can. After Coach Billy Riley passed away, Roy Wood moved the snake pit to Aspel, where it is currently running. And since then, people from all over the world have visited Coach Roy Wood to learn the traditional style of catch. He continues to carry on the teachings of Billy Riley with respect and honor. He is truly the last of his kind.
These guys were just a plethora of information. They had so much knowledge. Billy and Carl Gotch trained together at the Snake Pit. And Carl Gotch changed his name after Frank Gotch, because when Frank Gotch died, he said someone needs to honor his name, so he changed his name to Carl Gotch.
These were tough, gritty, hardy people. So what would they do for recreation, maybe? After 2 weeks of hard work in the spring and summer, they'd get together for community picnics. And they'd have foot races, maybe throw a boulder, a big-sized rock, like the forerunner to the shot put, and then they'd invariably have a wrestling match. Two guys would come to wrestle. Their friends would cheer them on, maybe 10 or 20 people there. And there'd be side bets. Say, I'll bet my guy can beat your guy. Oh, yeah? Put your money where your mouth is. Well, I'll put up 50 cents, which was a lot of money back then. And so you combine the hardiness, the grittiness of the people that settled Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, Kansas, tough people. Then you say, well, what was the difference between them, between Iowa and these other states, if they had the same type of people? The difference was Frank Gotch.
Those were tough men amongst tough men. That was a whole nother class, right? And he beat everybody, right? With the famous Gotch toehold.
You know, very blue collar, farming community, was not afraid to take a challenge, was not afraid to go against people larger than him.
The arguments about Frank Gotch being one of the greatest wrestlers to ever live are totally valid. I mean, it is an argument, sure. but he's up there. Ultimately, the body of his work and what he brought to just the consciousness of combat sports at the time and wrestling cannot be replaced. Period. Without him, it's a bum deal.
Frank Gotch was an Iowa farm boy that saw opportunities, seemed to have a knack for wrestling. He was, for all intents and purposes, the toughest man on the planet at that time.
Frank Gotch, probably one of the greatest all-time submission wrestlers to ever live.
Mike Chapman and I went to visit Frank Gotch's old family farmstead. And what happened next was a crazy, pleasant surprise.
Let's go over there real quick before he gets away from us. He might be coming over here to see who the hell we are, or he might be leaving. Maybe he's gonna turn around and come this way.
Oh, for sure.
I'll get out. Maybe. Is this the old Gotch farmstead?
Yeah.
I've got with me a film crew. We're making a documentary about Frank Gotch and the history of catch wrestling.
Fortunately, we ran into this man, Gary Erickson, a Vietnam veteran who had an amazing story to tell us about Frank Gotch.
He remembered his dad telling him that years ago, he jumped on a train. He was just a young guy then at that time. And he jumped on a train going out west because he had a job lined up on a ranch out there. Here, Frank Gotch was on that train. And they were making a tour out through the western states and back. Every stop they would make, he had his promoters go out, and usually they tried to find like the blacksmith or somebody like that.
Who would wrestle him?
Biggest, burliest guy in town to wrestle him. And that's how they kind of promoted their way. And he said, if you want to make some money, he says, just bet on Frank. And he says, but he says, when you hear the whistle on the train, he says, you get back to the train if you're in town. He says, that's our signal. Because Frank could just kind of play with them and wrestle and this and that. And when they blow that train whistle, boom, he'd pin them right there. He made more money on that trip out there than he did working on that ranch the whole summer long.
Because of Frank Gotch. Oh.
Traveling circuses, the carnivals, all these sorts of things, were a big thing. You travel around, there were grifters and athletes that would compete. They would compete in running races. They would set guys up and they'd intentionally lose the running race so that then they could say, hey, let's go 2 out of 3 and we'll do a match.
The carnies. Those were really tough, man.
Killers.
A lot of them were not only the wrestler, but they were also the fighter. So, you know what I mean? The carny would go to town to town to town to town.
These were guys that were rolling through towns like outlaws, stealing women, breaking hearts, breaking bones, putting guys out of injuries. You gotta understand, Daddy, this was before somebody just sat down at a computer and got to sit at a desk and work. We're talking about hard times, hard living, when you had to push that plow, you had to dig with that shovel. And these guys are going out there breaking fingers, breaking hands, mangling people. There was no Social Security. There was only just hoping on the help of your church, and these guys are sending you on the wrong path if you ever cross one of these boys in town. Fake names, fake aliases, you name it. Catch as catch can was a sport that was meant to be mean and nasty.
And then when they had a problem, for real, it turned into a rough and tumble. And the rough and tumbles were, hey, I don't like this guy, he challenged me, there's gonna be money at stake, and some of these guys would bite each other's noses off. I don't know if penicillin heals that, or a bitten off ear or a bitten cheek. You know, broken finger. Guys are breaking fingers, biting, thumbs in the eyes, fish hooking.
They were pretty gruesome, from my understanding. Lots of blood in these matches, teeth getting knocked out, knees blown out, shoulders, you know, damaged. There was not a part of their body that did not go through the wear and tear of their wars that they had.
You could make good money. You'd be the champ of one town, and there'd be another town over, and you know, everybody would bet on the hometown boy, and you know, some people would win, some people would lose.
That style leaned heavily on submission, because a lot of times you could get an amateur wrestler who could be pretty good, and the last thing the carnival wants to do is lose a match, because this works like carnivals do today. You know, the games that we all go to and go, gosh, I just spent $200 to win this small little teddy bear. It's a little bit of a hustle. And so the carnival's not going to stay in business where their wrestlers are losing. The submissions were called hooks, which gave the athletic show or the carny wrestler in Catch as Catch Can an advantage against the general public.
One of my students and fighter that I trained, he was super strong, and I was very surprised that he knew some catch stuff, and he was very confident with his takedowns and his ground stuff. And I said, well, where did you learn that? And he said, Billy Wicks, he's my coach. Pops, they call him Pops.
Pops Wicks. Pops Wicks was an old school carny wrestler, legit trained shooter pro wrestler. Pops can work a match too, but to get to the point to where you're gonna go out there and put on a show and work this match, you had to know your stuff. Plus you need to know your stuff in case the guy wanted to double cross you or the promoter didn't want to pay you. So Pops is a throwback to what an old school pro wrestler was, but the guy loved wrestling, and he loved giving wrestling to others.
The dude understood how to manipulate joints, okay? And if you've ever been manipulated by a chiropractor, you get a really good indication, because he could manipulate the heck out of you and hurt you, and you don't even know what's going on until it's over.
John Strickland trained with Billy Wicks a long time.
Yeah.
He was with him a long time. They had like
that's basically like his catch dad.
That's his other father. But I can tell you that he was an amazing person. He was a tough as nails wrestler, and you did not want. He's the last mother in the world you want to.
Yeah.
Lou Thez thought the world of him. I spoke to Charlie Thez, Lou's widow, a few years ago, and Lou thought that Billy was one of the best there was. Billy, he would end up, as we called him, Pops, he ended up teaching a hold to Elvis Presley. He was friends with Marty Robbins, he was friends with Johnny Cash. He ended up being a bodyguard for Judge Preston Battle. And Judge Preston Battle was the judge who sat over the James Earl Ray trial, who assassinated Dr. King.
I think his influence is only just beginning to be felt in catch wrestling. I think maybe through marketing, people know a little bit more about the British wrestlers, because like they ended up training pro wrestlers in Japan, and so a lot of people know about that. They know about Wigan. They don't quite know so much about the Americans, and I hope that we can change that, even with this documentary here.
Our trip to the farmstead led to a series of events that were surprisingly unexpected. It was as if the universe was helping us on our journey to ensure that these legends never fade.
You want to go with me? Or
yeah, I'll come with you.
It might not even be home.
Hope and pray.
Although it might be nice to have her come out and say hi to us.
Yeah, I know. You want to see?
Yeah.
See if anyone's home. Yeah, somebody is home, actually. I'll let you take it away.
I will. My name's Mike Chapman.
Oh, you wrote all the books.
Yeah, I'm the author.
I have your book in my lobby up here.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I've written 31 books now, but
Oh,
only
my
2 about Frank.
Okay.
And this is Curran Jacobs.
Hi.
Hello.
He won
Nice to meet
2
you.
Frank Gotch tournaments here in Humboldt when we had him.
Nice.
And then he won the United World Catch Championship. Catch was the style of wrestling that Frank did.
Yep.
And
Do you mind that we're recording?
No, I don't mind. You want to come in?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Curran, right there in this living room. or dining room, Frank Gotch sat here with Farmer Burns and Gentleman Jim Corbett, the former heavyweight boxing champion of the world, and they tried to talk him into taking on Jack Johnson.
This is where it was?
Right here in this room.
Okay. Farmer who?
Godfather of
American catch wrestling.
Pretty much.
That's the man.
Yeah, the best way to describe him, in my opinion.
That's the skinny man with the thick neck. You see, that's the thing. This guy made a device where he could hang himself.
Yeah.
To strengthen the neck muscles. How insane is that?
You know, a coach that would hang himself.
Farmer Burns.
To strengthen his neck. And don't try this at home. But, you know, those methods are a little bit outside the box, a little bit fanatical. And sometimes, you know what, that's what it takes.
Frank Gotch was a prized pupil of Farmer Burns. And Farmer was my coach's coach, and get that straight.
Martin Farmer Burns is one of the biggest catch wrestling trainers and a very well-known competitor as well. He made a lot of champions. He traveled around, trained guys, showed them the mindset and the tactics and technique for catch wrestling.
He was someone that was leading the charge of developing these next level athletes and trying to create that guy who would go on to be the next international star and could carry the sport themselves.
Frank Gotch became the great wrestler that he was because of Farmer Burns. Farmer Burns was a good fighter, he truly was, and a good wrestler, but he was an even better teacher. That's the gift he gave to the sport of wrestling. Highly respected by all of his peers. He was a dangerous man. He was what we call a hooker.
Farmer Burns would have to be considered one of the best and first trainers in the sport of wrestling.
He started his life, this is very, very early on in American history where after kind of Civil War time, and so he wasn't necessarily the most educated. So he has writings. So that's I think that shows a real accomplishment from someone who came from virtually nothing. He also had a book studies on better training techniques or psychology, kind of like sports psychology stuff of that time, which still resonate today.
One way to tell how good somebody is you see their product. And look at all the people that came to him to learn. He was the godfather. He was the godfather of catch wrestling. He actually took on Frank Gotch when Frank was 21 years old. And he saw that Frank Gotch had so much potential that he took him under as a student, and he made him great.
Oh, yeah. This is where they went at it.
Yeah.
He
right
shocked
here.
him.
Let's go see if the doors are open. I doubt they are. So we see if there's somebody in there?
Yeah. Of course we should.
Yeah. With the luck we've had so
I know,
far.
absolutely. Let's go snooping around.
Oh, the door is okay.
It is.
Wow.
Wow. Hello? Hello? I don't hear. Right here on stage.
Wow.
Was where it happened.
Yep.
Hey, how are you? Do you mind if we
take a picture in here?
It's cool? My man, come on in.
Do you know the most important wrestling match in American history took place in here?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Farmer Burns is up here and would say, I will give anyone $15?
$25.
$25 for whoever can pin or submit me up here.
Right.
$25, come here. Yeah!
And Frank Gotch and his friends from Humboldt would have come through that doorway. This would have been filled with chairs or bleachers. It would have been filled to capacity because it was a big deal when Farmer Burns came to town. And they would have taken seats and watched Farmer dispatch a couple contenders, and then Gotch, somebody would have yelled out, Burns' manager said, any more takers, any more comers? And Frank would have stood up and said, I'll try it, and walked up on this stage in 1899, shook hands with Farmer Burns, and they met for the first time ever. And that meeting changed the face of professional and amateur wrestling in America.
How sweet that people are just coming in here lining up. We need to bring that back. I almost want to do that in my hometown.
That's a good idea.
And be like, I'll take on all comers.
That's a good idea.
Who can pin or submit me? I think it'd piss off a lot of people, though.
Yeah.
Martin Farmer Burns and Frank Gotch are not the only duo that changed history. Let's move forward to 1925 when Carlos Gracie opened his own academy, after he met and trained with Mitsuyo Maeda. Did this catch wrestler influence the Gracie legacy?
100%. It influenced the Gracie legacy, of course. Now, Maeda was the most fearsome of Kano's jiu-jitsu fighters, judo fighters. He went out there, he learned the sport of catch as catch can, both here in England, he competed catch as catch can. He competed catch as catch can out in Brazil, and that's how he met the Gracie family. The Gracie family were catch wrestling promoters back in the day. You know, they had wrestling booths that travel from city to city, and that's how they met Maeda. You know, I heard that Maeda was undefeated in thousands of matches. He only ever lost under the rule set of catch as catch can. 100% Maeda influenced the explosion of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Have you ever heard of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Oh yeah, for sure, like the submissions and stuff like that.
Now, what if I asked you, have you ever heard of catch as catch can wrestling?
No, I haven't. What's that?
Have you ever heard of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah, Royce Gracie's one of my heroes, I'd say. He'd fight like 30 guys in a night. And his dad taught him how to change a tire just using the angle of his arm and whatnot, and that's how he got so good at his holds and everything. Not that big of a guy, but he'd fight big dudes, like 30 in a row in one night, and he'd beat the shit out of them.
Have you ever heard of catch as catch can?
I have not. What does that mean?
Never heard catch as catch can wrestling?
No.
There was the Newaza and the Tachiwaza. There were the throwers and there were the ground fighters. And there was two different schools or fractures. One was a throwing school, one was a ground school. And Maeda was both. He was judo and jiu-jitsu.
Every frickin' Gracie and Brazilian back then all could throw you on your head because it was important for that sense. And somewhere along the lines, I know Helio is considered maybe the figurehead for this, but the idea of competing in jiu-jitsu and using the guard game to playing off your back then kind of took note.
Basically, when I come to here, I brought the leg lock here. I brought the leg lock this country. Nobody knows the leg lock. And then even when I was competing, then nobody knows what the leg locks is, what the leg lock come from. When the Gracies started having a good name, they don't know nothing about the leg lock. Very old. I'm going back in the 80s. None of them understand about the leg locks at all.
With such an influence, why isn't catch wrestling as world-renowned as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
I think there's a few of us that have done well in mixed martial arts and touted or used wrestling and catch as catch can wrestling to defeat Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners and Brazilian black belts. But I think because of guys like Royce Gracie, other Gracie disciples in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that are black belts that have won, Nogueira and Belfort, and I mean there's a whole plethora of guys that are from the Jiu-Jitsu world that have done very, very well in mixed martial arts. There's only a handful of us that come from that wrestling background, and catch wrestling specifically, that have done well in MMA.
Catch really works great in MMA. It's fantastic for the takedowns, the rides, and the control, and then just punching the block off of somebody.
It should be taught alongside of jiu-jitsu because I believe that the two complement each other. You have the ability to wrestle. You have different attacks from catch wrestling than you do in jiu-jitsu.
The mindset is completely different, where jiu-jitsu is kind of this path of least resistance, go with the flow until you get a guy tired or out of position. catch him. And when wrestling and catch wrestling had that same mindset that collegiate wrestling and international style wrestling had, where you're going to force a guy, bend a guy into your will in the way you want him and where you want him.
You look at Gordon Ryan and Gary Tonin, look at their game. It's pretty catch wrestling-esque, although they're great on their back too. So there is that crossover. Their game to me is a hybrid jiu-jitsu style with a lot of catch wrestling aspects because of the leg attacks.
It's all grappling, right? It's all very similar. And Brazilian jiu-jitsu is a form of wrestling, so it'd be crazy to think that Mr. Maeda didn't affect Carlos Gracie in his perception and technique and tactics and what's effective. Bruce Lee, who also studied wrestling in all of its forms and assimilated some of those tactics and techniques into his fighting style in JKD.
Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, the proliferation of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and modern, it all owes it to professional wrestling, catch as catch can.
Back in Iowa, Frank Gotch set his sights on the American title held by Tom Jenkins, a Cleveland grappler known for his strength and tenacity. Born on August 3rd, 1872, Jenkins had been the American champion since 1899. He was 215 pounds of hard rock muscle with a mean streak. Gotch lost his first match to Jenkins in 1903.
When Farmer Burns starts training him, he says, I'm going to make you champion of America. The champion was Tom Jenkins. Their first match, he beats the crap out of Frank. He actually shut his eye with cross faces. He was spitting blood after Jenkins pinned him. Professional wrestling. Yeah. Gotch gets back to his corner and his manager says, Frank, I'm so sorry. And Frank says, get me a rematch with that son of a bitch. The rematch is in Bellingham, Washington, and people say it's the most brutal wrestling match ever seen. Frank beat the snot out and became heavyweight champion. The point is, Dan, I think about you and Larry Owings, how you say that you needed that to go to the next level. Gotch needed it to go to the next level too.
By the time Frank Gotch had hit his peak, Tom Jenkins was no longer a match for him. After Jenkins retired from competition, he became a boxing and wrestling coach at West Point, teaching Army cadets the art of self-defense. Among the famous men who learned wrestling under his tutelage were Dwight D. Eisenhower and George Patton. Jenkins taught at West Point for 37 years and was revered by the cadets. But Frank Gotch's greatest matches came with the man known around the world as the Russian Lion, George Hackenschmidt.
Hackenschmidt was a phenom. He was just a physical phenom. He was from Estonia, I believe.
Hackenschmidt was very ahead of his time. Because back in the day, they wouldn't have, he was probably one of the first guys that would take strength training and implement it into grappling.
At the age of 20, he gave up weightlifting when he discovered that he could make more money wrestling than he could as a strongman.
This guy's the Russian Lion. George Hackenschmidt was well-read. A lot of American wrestlers who were following catch wrestling, tend to think of this big, brawny, strong guy. George Hackenschmidt's this big brute. And Hackenschmidt was actually a very intelligent guy.
Hackenschmidt defeated Tom Jenkins twice and was the acknowledged heavyweight champion of the world when he agreed to face Frank Gotch in Chicago on April 3rd, 1908. The match was hyped nationwide, and Hackenschmidt was a strong favorite to defeat Gotch.
Hackenschmidt was tearing everybody up. In his size, he was more of a Greco guy, but I think Greco at the time would be a little bit different than now. I'm sure he knew some other tricks of the trade. Wrestles Gotch and gets beat with what is the famous Gotch toe hold.
In Frank's book, he mentions I wasn't really even trying to break anything, but as soon as I applied that hold, pretty much he gave up.
The rematch between Gotch and the Russian Lion was inevitable, and it was the match of the century.
Hackenschmidt had been the world heavyweight champion. He was considered unbeatable. And Frank beat him in 1908 in Dexter Pavilion in Chicago. Down the town square of Humboldt was all excited. the fire engine ran around the square clanging its bell, and a guy standing on top saying, "Our Frank is the heavyweight champion of the world."
When he fought the Russian Lion, I think there were 30,000 people in attendance. This was in 1911, 1913. So, a huge spectator sport back then.
Yeah. Frank Gotch and George Hackenschmidt.
So right here is where Frank Gotch trained. He prepared for his rematch with George Hackenschmidt. Thousands of people would come here and just watch him.
Bill, it's been a symbol of pride for the community, hasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. People are very proud of it, and I still have people come up to me and say, you know, that is sure neat that we have that statue of Gotch there. And that's been over a decade now, so we're just...
It's hard to believe.
It was right here next to the river where he shook that dude's hand. I gotta ask Mike, he was just a bruiser. Just, would throw you. This is the giant that Frank Gotch shook hands with right here in this park.
Yankee Joe Rogers.
Yankee Joe Rogers?
Yes. He was one of his main training partners.
He's huge.
Yes, yeah. He was big and tough, and Frank used him for a training partner. They once wrestled each other, and Frank had no problem with him at all, but he hired him for a training partner. He would have 4 different training partners, Curran, and different sizes, and that's what Dan Gable did himself many years later. And Frank would alternate them in on him, and he would go and go and go.
It was September 4th, 1911 in Chicago. Comiskey Park was only just a year old at the time. Frank Gotch made a statement by dominating the Russian Lion, pinning him twice within 33 minutes.
In the 20s, catch wrestling was still considered a sport and a lethal sport. And it didn't get theatrical until they started adding acrobatics and acting. Acting kind of came in later because you had to develop a character.
A lot of people don't recognize that what we know as pro wrestling now has its roots and was catch-as-catch-can wrestling. And I think a lot of people don't recognize the distinction or make that connection. So showing them historically how we got where we are and what we see now with SmackDown or some of these big shows, it started back there with Frank Gotch and Farmer Burns and these guys that were traveling around and creating these big grappling matches and creating world championships and catch-as-catch-can, morphed into what we know now as pro wrestling.
Lou Thez once told me, all that mattered from the 1940s on wasn't who could beat who. He said the boys knew it, that's what they called each other. The boys knew who could beat who in gyms and workouts. But all the promoters cared about was, would people pay again to see you in the ring?
Well, this goes back to kind of an earlier question where the general audience is not educated on wrestling. They're not educated on what they're seeing. They're seeing these long, boring matches, and they don't understand them. So promoters decided and wrestlers decided, hey, let's make this more, for like a word's catchy. Let's make something that draws people in and gets them excited, makes them want to tune in and watch.
Who would want to watch hours of guys stalemating because they know that this thing is going to go until someone wins? So they're playing this long game as well as a I mean, if an opening was there, they would have taken it. But they knew that they were so tightly matched and so strong and so in shape that nobody was going to give up anything.
And then as we moved into the 1950s, just before and just after World War II, that's when it changed. It was all about the entrance and the storyline and the outfits and the rhetoric, and less about the submissions and the escapes and stuff in the cage, in the ring.
Wrestling was hurt during World War II, wrestling viewership, and I think that didn't help legitimate wrestling. And the reason we had a lot of people being drafted, people were working, the country was at war. The world was at war. And after that, that's when we start really seeing a spike in the entertainment side of wrestling.
I had the great privilege of spending 2 days with Muhammad Ali in Cedar Rapids in 1985. He had retired, he was no longer boxing, charming, wonderful. Couldn't have been any nicer to everybody. Kids, signed autographs, sat on the floor with kids with his legs crossed doing magic tricks with cards. He said, I decided to use a technique I learned from Gorgeous George, the old pro wrestler. I went into matches in Louisville when I was a kid, and I'd sit there enthralled and saw how the audience loved to hate Gorgeous George, his antics and how he bragged and that. And I thought to myself, wow, people will come to see you lose as much as to see you win.
Babe Ruth was a catch wrestling referee. Primo Carrera. Muhammad Ali did a great show, did a mixed match with Antonio Inoki, the godfather of strong style wrestling in Japan. So we have always been interlinked with all these other events. We've always been the main part of the show. We've always brought in the talent. We've always brought in the looks because we were the backbone that could carry it across the finish line.
You know how much people love WWF? Because it's everybody knows it's a show, but it's because it's a catch wrestling. They think, okay, well, if the real one is dangerous, then we can do the fake one. And this is what the show business come up. And then they hit it. You know, they become very popular because now people know they're not going to break it to each other, but everything is going to be fake. But still, people get hurt and people get pain. And you see a lot of good techniques in there. People are still using it, but they're not finishing it, but they're still using it what they had before. I think this is maybe the reason because of the dangerous, you know, the people scare. I think that's why maybe they switch it.
Pro wrestling may be predetermined, but those are tough athletes. They put their bodies on the line, and the discipline it takes to fake violence without actually hurting someone takes tremendous skill. All for the love of entertaining the crowd, bringing them in on the drama, the action, the excitement.
Dan Severn was brought over into the UWFI, and you know he had to learn some stuff from being on these excursions.
We did in fact visit the Beast, an accomplished amateur wrestler, mixed martial artist, and professional wrestler. The Beast gave us a close insight into the world of professional wrestling entertainment. And the Beast Severn, the first man to introduce wrestling as a legitimate aspect to mixed martial arts.
There you go. I'm gonna say just the first guy just to step in to show that wrestling is a viable, as Mike Chapman put it, that wrestling is actually a martial art.
Absolutely.
In his words.
The matches are predetermined. It is for entertainment, but to call it fake, has that ever offended you?
Well, sure it has. I defend it all the time. It is a show. There is a predetermined outcome. I said, but what I want you to understand is, do all of these athletes get along? The quick answer will be no. Why should they be putting the championship belt on you when you can't carry this guy's jockstrap over here? I got your match with this guy over here. So that's where now this thing called pride comes into effect. Or what in the process of the match, you thumped him a little bit harder. You may not have pulled your punch quite right, and you actually hit him, and you might have broke his nose for real. And now it's called giving you back a receipt. Oh, you do this to me, here's your receipt. Pow, I'm gonna pop you right back here. But Vince McMahon himself, he was the guy that pulled the rabbit out of the hat and exposed it because up to that point in time, he and everyone else was trying to portray that, yeah, this is real. But because it was portrayed as being real, they now fell underneath all the guidelines of each state's athletic commission rules.
I would actually love now to have you show us a few of your signature professional wrestling moves, and you can either do it on me or you can do it on our cameraman here. Depends on how, what you want to do. But
well, I mean, do you have flexible type of clothing enough to? I mean, I may have to go throw my wrestler shoes out here because my stocky feet are gonna probably slip.
I'm willing to do whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a couple things that we could do.
Our cameraman and editor, Adam Towner, was brave enough to step in the ring with the Beast and learn a thing or two about pro wrestling. How are you feeling?
Fantastic. That was going down, baby.
No, seriously, how do you feel about getting chopped?
We'll circle around just like the game. Yeah, circle. And then like see what these does. What they do is he's going to tap. And all it is just one step in, one step. But no, you stop with that foot tap.
Am I staying close to you or just in the arms? Are we locked?
I mean, no, we're gonna lock up and you hook up on my forearm, just like that. Just like the cookie out. Just back and forth. I'll try to do something, but I have to take it and leverage out to you. So I do it all on this one take it off. Oh, big man, you're going to, I'm going to break you right now here, big man. I'm going to break you.
Beast is going down, brother. Oh, man, you are mine, brother.
Get him off, man. Get him off.
Ooh, does he need it? Does he need it, brother? Oh. Come on, all right. Oh, you're the beast. You're the beast.
Please, no problem. We're gonna let you.
I don't get that. Do not do this with the beast.
And we've seen it a lap over into some sports, some more than others. Conor McGregor, I think, took a page from that book. And then you have somebody like Randy Couture, who's so dignified. Randy didn't have to do that kind of stuff. Randy, he'd come in the ring and just kind of smile. He was Randy Couture. He was Captain America. He was a veteran of the armed service. Randy's deal was to be Randy Couture. Frank Gotch's deal was to be Frank Gotch. Farmer Burns got a hold of Caddock and said, why don't you try pro wrestling? He wrestled pro for 2 years. The great Joe Stecker was the heavyweight champion of the world. They wrestled in Omaha for the world championship. At that point, I think amateur and pro combined, Caddock was 100-0, had never lost. Stecker was 68-0 as a pro, had never lost. The match went 2 hours. Caddock wore him out, beat him. It was 2 out of 3 falls. Stecker couldn't come out for the second fall. Earl Caddock is now the heavyweight champion of the world. He joins the army. He fights on the Western Front in France. Stecker was in the Navy, didn't really see any serious action. After the war's over, they hold a rematch in New York's Madison Square Garden. It's a sellout, 14,000 people. The army soldiers walk in carrying a flag. Caddock comes in behind him. Stecker comes in from the other side. with Navy sailors carrying a flag. They wrestled 2 hours and 3 minutes. And Stecker wins back the title. He's now the new heavyweight champion. The next day, in the promoter's office, Stecker and Caddock are there to get their checks. The promoter says to them, we had a sellout. We can do this in Chicago, Detroit, Kansas City, Des Moines, Iowa, Omaha. We'll sell out every arena. Everybody can't wait to see you two again. Young, handsome, well-built veterans will flip the title back and forth between the two of you to build the interest. I'm going to tell you a story that I've never told publicly before. Earl Caddock is buried on a hillside in Walnut, Iowa. I'm standing there with his two sons, both in their late 60s at this time. And the youngest son says to me, Mike, my dad told us that he and Joe sat in that promoter's office and listened to all the plans for us to sell out all these arenas and make a ton of money. Joe and I walked out and walked down the street in New York City together. And I looked at him and I said, Joe, I can't do that. I can't deceive the public. I can't fake matches. Joe looked at him, stuck out his hand and said, I can't either, Earl. They shook hands. They never wrestled again. Caddock wrestled a few matches after that. He was never the same after World War I. Stecker, bless his heart, lost almost all of his money in the Great Depression. Had to wrestle for many more years, suffered a mental breakdown. Ended up being institutionalized in a veterans home in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Every now and then a stranger would come up and sit on the back porch and play checkers with him. The stranger's name was Earl Caddock. I've never told these stories in public before.
This is where the legend rests.
Oh, I like that.
Yes. I like it too.
My kids think the house is haunted. Every time something a little weird happens, like they'll say, oh, there's Frank. Or like if the dog will sit there and stare at the wall, he'll say, well, he's staring at Frank.
Really? The ghost of Frank Gotch.
I've never seen.
Thousands of weeping mourners gathered from many parts of the country trudged the Iowa path to the little rural cemetery on a cold December day to bid a final farewell to the Iowa farm boy who had been the greatest wrestling champion in history. Thank you so much for this has been an unbelievable experience. Oops.
Frank Gotch was supposed to face Joe Stecker, and it was considered a dream match by fans worldwide. But Gotch fell ill and was unable to continue his professional career. He passed away from Bright's disease, and a shot of penicillin would have cured him, but it wasn't invented yet.
Up until the 50s and 60s, it was common to have amateur wrestling in the YMCAs. We don't see that anymore. And so while amateur wrestling, I think, has gained in more popularity today since I was a kid, if it wasn't for the school system, I don't think we would have it as much.
So folk style wrestling is catch wrestling with rules for kids.
Yep.
Because you couldn't, want kids to blow out their shoulders when they were 6, 7 years old.
The rules of folk style are very much derived from catch. So if you watch high school wrestling, now think about being able to throw submissions on someone while you do it. That's basically catch.
The programs that we see today in Iowa, when you think of Dan Gable, or you think of the brands, you think of Iowa strength, Iowa's toughness in wrestling, I kind of like to think that it's been that way since Burns and Gotch and those guys.
You have even wrestling tradition still to this day with University of Iowa, Dan Gable, all that, because the whole idea of real wrestling, like, pinning somebody, that was there. And so then people from there, they're going to be raised in that type of mindset. So you're going to have good wrestlers there.
Being a great teacher, being able to advance your knowledge to the next athlete, that's what made Dan Gable so good. He was a great athlete, but he became a better teacher than even he thought he could be.
Thought, we have to get your input on that Iowa style, that aura that still shines bright today.
And I would start by saying that great athletes have great coaches, or great wrestlers are coached by great coaches. And, you know, that's the case with Terry and I, with Gable. And then you look at Gotch and Farmer Burns. And that's where it started. So if you know your history, there's lineage there.
In my estimation, you two are doing more to carry on the legacy of Burns and Gotch than anybody I've known since Gable.
Hey, do you wanna demonstrate the toe hold on camera? You wanna like put me in it? Right here. Right here. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay. Typically, when you shoot in, so I'm in deep here, if you were to sprawl on me, I could come off to one side here, come here, I'd reach, I'd grab his toe, pull it in, and then come underneath here and pull.
Hey, you're missing the most important part here, his face.
But that's it. You would either tap or go to your back and pin yourself.
Well, Hackenschmidt.
And you would wrestle like this.
Yeah,
you would. You'd be bouncing around.
We were talking about the toe hold earlier. You know, that was, you know, people think that you grab the big toe and you twist it.
Yeah.
They don't realize that you're going to lose your whole freaking ankle. You know, from the knee down, you're going to, you know, compound fracture. Compound fracture.
Yeah.
I mean, it's coming if you don't tap.
That's right.
It's
again.
Well, toe holds are illegal in high school and college.
Yes, they are.
You can't pull toes, even though I use them on my kids, my grandkids.
We had a rare opportunity to visit with a true legend in the sport of wrestling. Dan Gable welcomed us into his home and shared his thoughts on catch and how it influenced his own illustrious career.
It's going right now? Is this going?
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is.
Well, let me tell you, Humboldt, Iowa. You know, it's people might think that it's all about Gotch, which it is. It's a lot about Gotch. I mean, he set the tone probably for that town. I mean, that's why they got a statue of him right there. But Humboldt, Iowa is where this guy, in his senior year in college, got assigned to that town to do student teaching, because I was going to be a teacher. It was after my senior year, so I was coming off a loss to Larry Owings. So I lost to Larry Owings in March of 1970, and I student taught in the fall. And I just couldn't believe what Humboldt, Iowa did for me. They brought me back to life. Frank Gotch, to me, is somebody that means a lot, but he meant a lot more to people back in the day when he was actually doing his thing.
Right.
And then he created people that did their thing, and then new people watched those people. Mm-hmm. So it's like right now, people are watching Kyle Snyder, you know, they're watching, you know, Kyle Dake, Jordan Burroughs. When I was training for the Olympics, we didn't really have all these formal training grounds. So you got to go home, but in Waterloo, Iowa, they took it on. They knew that when I came home, they had places for me to work out. I had a place in my basement. I had a place in one of my dad's friend's garage. And guess who I brought home with me?
Who?
John Peterson, Ben Peterson, Chris Taylor. Look at the wrestling room. There's been some lots of good matches in here. You know why this is so good in here? Because you got to stay in the middle of the mat, otherwise you're out of bounds. So you get so much, you can't back up. If you back up, you're out of bounds. So the bottom line is you got to keep circling towards the center, and that's why you get so much done. That's why you get so much done. Yep. Yeah. And you can't believe the good practices that I've had in here with one-on-one with people. Or not, because when I first put it in here, I didn't have pads.
Oh wow.
There's people's heads holes behind here. Randy Lewis's head's in there. I've trained a lot in here with kids. Not only Iowa guys, but even my grandkids.
You know, it's really an ode and a dedication to this man here, Mike Chapman and Randy Couture. If I would have never had dinner with them in Malibu in 2014, I would have never known anything about the history that I've fallen in love with.
You were hooked, to use a familiar catch term.
Yes.
I never saw anybody gravitate towards something so fast, Curran. And within a year, you were very successful in catch wrestling. And I think you're the perfect person. I've been carrying the Frank Gotch torch for 50 years. And standing right here in front of his mausoleum, I think it's a perfect time to pass the torch to you. You're now the flag bearer for Frank Gotch. Take good care of his legacy, my friend.
That means a lot to me. Thank you so much.
It is so important for people to know that wrestling has brought societies together since the dawn of civilization. The relationships that are created within these communities is truly something special. It wasn't that long ago that we were fighting to save Olympic wrestling. Everyone that was involved in this film, they did it for the love of the history of wrestling, with the hope that these legends and their stories do not fade away with time. We hope that every style within the sport of wrestling continues to flourish.
I did a seminar at Kenny Chertow's in Pennsylvania, and I said that I was training Ken Shamrock at the time. And every single kid like stood up, oh, let me show you my favorite move. And every little kid had a pro wrestling move they wanted to show me. And it was all catch wrestling.
Martial arts and combat sports bring people across nations together. You know, getting on those mats and going at it, be it if it's Brazilian Jiu Jitsu or it's judo or it's catch wrestling or what have you, it's bringing people from all over the place.
It's about getting it out there to the masses, you know, for the love of catch. I think this documentary is going to play a huge part in that, and long may it continue.
A lot of times it boils down to funding. Title IX is a huge issue. We've decimated a lot of junior high programs and high school programs and collegiate programs in the name of gender equity. But now with the female version of our sport, that's changing. We have 30 colleges now that have women's wrestling. It's a full medal Olympic sport and freestyle. I think that having a female counterpart to wrestling is going to help. But I think the biggest thing is educating people about the connection, the history of Catch as Catch Can, and the stars and the people that are in it. And using those guys like myself and Josh Barnett and Neil Melanson that come from that catch world, that wrestling world. Dan Henderson, Matt Lindland. There's a plethora of guys now that came from the wrestling background that are doing very, very well in mixed martial arts. Just highlighting that background, making those connections, educating people on the history and where this sport actually came from. We can go all the way back to Egypt, and there's techniques in hieroglyphs that are still used to this day. So pretty amazing.
Saturday
say her young beau called to see if she'd like to go to see a show, but Miss Kate said no. I'll tell you what you can do. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Katie Casey saw all the games, knew the players by their first names, told the umpire he was wrong all along, good and strong. When the score was just 2-2, Katie Casey knew what to do. Just to cheer up the boys she knew, she made the gang sing this song. Take me out to the ball game, take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker